Well, for more on Haiti, we're joined now by Robert Fatton. He's a professor of politics at the University of Virginia and the author of The Guise of Exceptionalism, Unmasking the National Narratives of Haiti and the United States. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I first want to start in the country itself. We know that elections were supposed to happen over the weekend, but were postponed. Talk about what's behind the delay and the importance of getting that process underway.
Well, even before the death of Jovenel Moïse, the president, there was serious doubt about the possibility of having elections. And with the death of the president, this is not going to happen anytime soon. We've just heard from the current Prime Minister, Rachlle Henry, that he intends to have the elections sometime next year. On the other hand, there is a problem, and a serious problem, and that's the Electoral Council. Rachlle Henry has dissolved that Electoral Council. He wants to create a new Electoral Council. But the Electoral Council itself has said that Rachelle Henry's decision is illegal. So we are not quite sure whether the decision of Rachelle Henry will stand. Now, if you look at the problems in Haiti, you can understand why the elections at this time would be really quite impossible. You have a terrible security situation in the major towns, in particular in the capital city, Port-au-Prince, where the gangs have controlled large chunk of the capital city. You've had the natural disasters in the south of the country with the earthquake and the hurricane. Traffic is quite difficult at this moment. And in addition to that, you have a logistical problem. In other words, the census has not been really reviewed, and it's difficult to know who's going to be able to vote because the process has not even started. So it's unlikely that we are going to have elections anytime soon. Now, the international community had wanted those elections. They thought that elections would be a good thing because they would settle the political situation, which has been very volatile. But given the situation, it's really, I think, unwise to have elections at this moment, because if you have elections, even next year, early next year, it's unlikely that the results will be perceived by the Haitian population and by most political parties as legitimate.
And
we just have to wait.
As you mentioned, that volatility, obviously this is coming in light of also, you have reaction to recent events in the US with the US Border Patrol's handling of Haitians, you have the migrant deportations, and of course the envoy's resignation. What is the country making of what's happening to their migrants in the US?
Well, they are quite upset, and they are upset because they think that the policies of the Biden administration are not that different from those of the Trump administration when it comes to immigration, and in particular of Haitian migrants. And they think that there is, to put it bluntly, a very strong undercurrent of racism in those decisions. So there is discontent. But on the other hand, Haitians are also quite unhappy in Haiti, and this is why they exit the country and they take that very dangerous trek. Most of the migrants who were in Texas were people who had left the country a few years ago after the 2010 earthquake, and they were in Brazil, in Chile, in Colombia, in Venezuela, and in Mexico. But they thought that the Biden administration would change the policies, right, and therefore they took a chance. They had heard during the electoral campaign that both the president and the Vice President Kamala Harris had said that we would welcome migrants if they were facing a terrible political situation or were facing natural disasters. So they took that chance, and once they arrived there, they realized that nothing had really fundamentally changed, and they were deported.
So obviously, since that strategy didn't change and Haitians are facing the brunt of those decisions, you also have that compounded, of course, with a pandemic that's going on. How has the pandemic affected the island, and what do even vaccination efforts look like there?
Well, the vaccination effort is extremely weak. We don't even have 1% of the population which is vaccinated. Fortunately, the death toll has been rather limited. there are fewer than 600 people who supposedly have been killed because of COVID. And we don't know the real rate of infection because testing is rather limited. But on the other hand, the catastrophe that we might have had expected as a result of COVID has not really, unfortunately, come. The death toll, as I've said, even if the statistics underestimate the numbers, it's still a very low number for a population of over 12 million people.
We do appreciate your insights. Robert Fatton there, Professor of Politics at the University of Virginia and author of The Guise of Exceptionalism, Unmasking the National Narratives of Haiti and the United States.